as Ron Paul and others have said, we have to identify the private central banks as the problem so they can't use the crisis they've created to slingshot them into an even greater position of power.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have to be in the position of saying in our states, we have an alternative currency system in place now. We don't need you or your solution to the problem that you caused. Right? You can take your paper money and you can eat it if you want. We no longer need that. We don't need something from the IMF. We don't need something from the Bank of International Settlements, however they intend to set this up on a global scale, because we have adopted an economically sound and constitutional currency. That's step number one. But step number two, then, has to be the organization within each state of the total community in the way the Constitution tells us is necessary to the security of a free state, that is the well-regulated militia, so that we can control our homeland security problems at the local and state level and not be dependent upon FEMA or the Army, or for that matter, even the National Guard.
And that's why they've raced to make us so domesticated, where people see someone knifed and stabbed to death, they're so lazy, they don't even call the police, much less help the person themselves.
That's right, the Kitty Genovese syndrome. Right? Remember that story?
Yes.
The poor woman that was screaming in New York City, and people were looking out their windows, but nobody did anything, and she was, I think she was knifed to death. All right, exactly that attitude. So we have to turn that around completely and bring people back into what the Constitution tells us is the necessary mode of total community organization. Now, once you put those two things together, the alternative currency and the revitalized constitutional militia structure, and again, I'm talking about the militia under the U.S. Constitution, not some kind of private organizations being set up. Once you have those two, that state will be exercising the two key powers of government, as all political philosophy tells us: the power of the purse, right, power over money, and the power of the sword, Homeland Security, the militia, whatever term you want to use. Those are the keys, because you will not have state sovereignty, and you certainly will not have popular sovereignty until those two powers have been returned to the states and directly to the people. If you have a proper alternative currency, which is based upon gold and silver, so it's tied directly into the marketplace, then the people will have direct control over that. And if you have the militia, which is composed of the people as a whole, all of them armed and organized and disciplined and trained in some way, then you will have that level of state sovereignty directly controlled by the people. And when the people control those two levels of state sovereignty, you have true self-government. And where the Founding Fathers expected us to be, hoped that we would be, and gave us the tools to get there.
All right, let me ask you then a constitutional law question, and I want to be specific. When I criticize ragtag militias, I'm not criticizing the men, the women, the people that see the threat, the people that are forming their own local communities, unorganized. I think that's good. The problem is the feds have been caught going in, trying to radicalize, making them act like clowns, provocateuring them to then demonize the overall idea of a militia. The real militia, and explain it in actual constitutional terms, would be if we took over our counties and cities, and then we're the people, and then we, the voters, decide how it's set up, and we're not paying all these federal taxes. We're levying the taxes locally. We're making the decisions. We actually are in control of the police. We're in control of the juries, the grand juries. We run things. But to do that, we've got to be involved. But going out behind the cabin with your neighbor and saying we're preparing to take on the New World Order, that's fine to defend yourself from criminals or whatever, or even if you had to a tyrannical government. But to offensively take the nation back, it needs to be the county sheriffs, the county commissioners, the city council. We need to have this message and take over the government and run our flag up. That's the official way to do it. That's what the founders did, the 13 colonies, the government representatives. They went together, they got together, and it was legitimate, it was real. Instead, you have the Republic of Texas, not all the groups, but saying, I'm the president. You had 8 different groups saying they were all the president. Right. It was clownish.
That's exactly right. The key to this is to obtain legal authority under our constitutional structure. There is a way to do that. You can look back through history all the way into the earliest colonial times. You can see what that structure was. We can do it now. Ultimately, it's a matter of passing a statute. I think could probably be done at a county level or the town level or whatever, but it would have only obviously limited authority within that jurisdiction.
But those could be models for the state.
That's right. You could obviously you could start doing this kind of thing. I wouldn't, if they were done at the county level, I wouldn't call the organizations militia. If your county council set something up, you might call it a county committee of safety or a county homeland defense organization or whatever. Give it some other name, because in constitutional principle, you know what the militia are called? The militia of the several states. They are state institutions, and they always were. They were broken down internally by towns or counties. But
yeah, what matters is they're accountable to the people instead of the feds coming in and controlling the local system.
That's right, because they are the people. You see that you have perfect transparency, you have perfect accountability. Why? Because these institutions are self-governing institutions composed of the people themselves. That's what it always amazes me how difficult it seems to be to get this idea across to the average American. If you want self-government, then you have to start exercising or participating yourself in self-government. Self-government is not a spectator sport.
Yeah, you can't abdicate and, quote, hire professionals, because in every case in history, the professionals are going to come in and rob you.
That's right. They're going to become the governors, and you're going to become the subjects. That's the rule of history, the rule of political philosophy. I mean, every time you look at that kind of a system, it moves in the direction of centralized control, and the people lower down in the pyramid, because they're always pyramidal structures, the people lower down in the pyramid have less and less control. Our constitutional pyramid works exactly the other way. Sovereignty is at the bottom, and less authority is delegated to the top. But for sovereignty to exist, sovereignty has to be exercised. People cannot claim to be sovereigns unless they take sovereign actions, unless they perform sovereign functions. Otherwise, they're going to be subjects.
That's right. I mean, if you want to bake a cake, you got to make it.
That's right. And you've got to be the cook. You've got to mix the ingredients, follow the recipe, take those steps, and then be responsible for the outcome. Right?
Well,
and what people in this country don't want to do is they don't want, number one, apparently too many of them for too long haven't wanted to do the work, and then they've wanted to pass on the responsibility for failure to somebody else. In a self-governing society, you're responsible for success and failure.
Let me ask you this question. No other country, except maybe Switzerland, the Netherlands for a time, has been able to do what we've created here. And I really researched our founders. I mean, they were some of the most exceptional men in history, and such a large concentration of exceptional. I mean, that's why the King of England, King George III, whenever George Washington refused kingship, here in the U.S., he said he's the greatest man in the world today, because no one really in history had refused the Caesar power when it was offered. So I just don't know. We're so wrecked societally. We're so decadent and lazy. There's a lot of good people. And in a republic, it doesn't matter if 80% are a bunch of sloths. I guess it's up to us to go take over the system and be the sovereigns. But then if the mass isn't involved, it'll kind of degenerate back into the same thing. I mean, are we up to this beautiful republic? Do we even deserve it?
Well, we have to be, because we have no choice. The only choice is to give up and let those people who are far worse than we are, the New World Order rights, win. And damn it, I don't intend to let them do that.
No, I agree with you.
We have no choice, Alex. And I think we'll find enough people. You know, leaven is a very small amount of the loaf, right?
Yes.
Always. The yeast is just a tiny amount, and it moves the entire mass of flour. We will find that 5% or 10%, and then the great mass of people, most of whom I think in this country are people of goodwill and basic common sense. You know, they may not have been educated as well as they should have been in this public school system. You can go all down this list of horribles that we have. But basically, I think they're of sound mind and good disposition. And when they are shown by a proper leadership group the right way to go, they will go along.
Oh, I agree with you. They've never been shown what true freedom is. They've just been kind of in this ether. A fish doesn't know it's in the water.
That's right. And they have the good sense to know which way to jump. I mean, the fish has the good sense to know which way to jump. Not back onto the sand, but into the water, right? If he's given the opportunity, if it's given the opportunity. And I think exactly the same is true of the average American. When the right leaders come along and show them the correct alternatives, they will adopt those alternatives.
Well, I study history. I mean, just 100 years ago, people jealously guarded their freedom and knew it was important. We've got to get that same mistrust of government back. We've got to cut the size of it. Stay there, Doctor.